His son Stephen believes his father is a stand-up guy.
Never in a million years did I think, oh, maybe my dad had something to do with this.
But when wife number 3 dies under mysterious circumstances,
she told her sisters that she feared he would kill her and make it look like an accident.
and wife number 4 disappears without a trace,
They did a massive search for Stacy, and they can't find her.
Drew Peterson's children are forced to face the horrible truth.
Anytime something major like this happens, the first stage is denial. You can't expect ever that your family member would be capable of murder.
Stephen Peterson knows his father Drew better than anyone.
My father was a police officer in Bolingbrook, Illinois. He did everything from the undercover man's unit to patrol, and then eventually became a sergeant.
But good guy Drew has a dark side. On the evening of February 28, 2004, he breaks his oath to protect. Just down the street from the Peterson household, 40-year-old Kathleen Savio gets ready for bed.
Kathleen Savio was Drew Peterson's third wife. She had 2 children with him, 2 sons. She and Drew had finalized a very bitter divorce. The kids were living with her, Thomas and Christopher. But Drew had visitation every other weekend.
With her children away at their father's, Kathleen is alone in the house on a Saturday night. Moments after murdering his ex-wife, Drew returns home to his 4th wife, Stacy Peterson, and crawls into bed. The next evening, Drew Peterson goes through the motion of returning the kids to Kathleen's house, but there is no answer.
So they spent another night with him. Drew went back the next day, and that's when he got the locksmith to open the door and the neighbors to come over and take a look inside the house.
Upstairs, the neighbor makes a horrific discovery. Kathleen Savio lies lifeless in her bathtub.
It appeared that Kathleen was taking a bath and may have slipped and hit her head and become unconscious and drown in the bathtub.
Across town, Drew's son Stephen has no idea that something tragic has happened in his family.
I get a call from my dad, and he says, Kathy died. You need to come home, be with the family. I instantly went in the shock. I couldn't believe it.
When Stephen arrives home, he's met by his father Drew and Drew's current wife, 21-year-old Stacy.
I get home, and my dad and Stacy are in the kitchen, and he explained to me that he tried to bring the kids home after a weekend, and nobody answered the door, and that she slipped and fell in the bathtub, hit her head, and she drowned. And it was just a total freak accident. When my dad told me what was going on, you could see he was upset. He generally looked upset.
No one in the Peterson family suspects foul play. But Stephen knows that his father has a troubled history with the women in his life.
The marriage between my mom and my father ended because my mother found out he was having an affair. So our first stepmother came into the picture, and then as time went on, it became, oh, she's horrible, and she's doing this and stealing from me. But of course we know. Looking back now, that wasn't the case. It was a divorce, and he cheated on her too. I guess her 10 years were up, and he had another affair with Kathleen, and here comes our next stepmother.
Over time, the relationship between Drew and Kathleen becomes hostile.
They'd butt heads over even stupid things. They'd butt heads over, and that escalated things to where they were fighting.
Drew Peterson knows how to manipulate the system to his advantage. On March 1st, 2004, investigators examine the site of Kathleen Savio's death. The Will County Coroner's Office completes an autopsy on her body 3 weeks later.
Initially, when Kathleen Savio died, the coroner's office reviewed it and decided that she had drowned. She was lying in the bathtub. She had a cut to the back of her head from when she had fallen.
a coroner's inquest is performed due to the unusual nature of Kathleen's death.
Under Illinois law, at the time Kathleen died, a coroner's jury had to sit and hear evidence in what's considered an unnatural death. So a healthy woman dying in her bathtub at home by what appeared to be a slip and fall was considered unnatural.
No one suspects Kathleen's ex-husband, Drew Peterson. He has an alibi, his young wife, Stacy.
The police came and sat down with Stacy and Drew, and they interviewed them together. And Stacy told the police that Drew had been home on the night of Kathleen's death.
All night?
Yes, sir.
At the time, everybody accepted that it was a freak accident, and that's what happened. And honestly, I didn't even give it a second thought. Never in a million years did I think, oh, maybe my dad had something to do with this or anything like that.
At the coroner's inquest, an Illinois state police officer who had investigated the case, a seasoned detective, testified that, in his opinion, there was no evidence of foul play and it was an accident.
After only 2 hours of deliberation, the coroner's jury reaches a verdict. Kathleen's death is ruled accidental. No charges are filed. With Kathleen dead, Drew's 21-year-old wife, Stacy, suddenly finds herself the mother of 4 young children.
It seems that as Drew Peterson got older and took on yet another wife, the wives got younger. By the time he met Stacy, there was a 30-year difference.
My dad told me that he was seeing someone else and that she was a little younger than him. Okay, didn't really say how young or how old she was, anything like that. He says, I have an apartment for her across town. Come by and let's meet her. First impression was I was in shock. I couldn't believe that she was younger than me. I was only 21, 22 at the time, and she was 18. So that was a pretty big shock. It was a lot to handle, actually. So when he's 48 and she's 18, one, it didn't look right, and 2, morally, it was probably not right. I definitely didn't agree with it.
Like 1999's American Beauty, the age difference between Drew and Stacy is disturbing.
Finally, someone in the community sent an anonymous letter to Kathleen alerting her that her husband was seeing this teenager.
Drew and Kathleen divorce, and despite the age difference, Stacy and Drew marry within days.
It was a pattern with Drew Peterson. He ends one marriage and starts another, and the new marriage starts out on a good foot, and it did with Stacy. They enjoyed each other's company, they traveled, he bought her things.
Within 2 years, Drew and his young bride have 2 children of their own.
And even though there's an age gap, there's a normal relationship. There was happiness in the home, we had parties, everything was just normal. As much as it doesn't make sense for that relationship to be normal, it was.
But Drew's marriage with Stacy mirrors his past relationships. The honeymoon phase is quickly followed by marital turmoil.
Stacy kind of confided in my wife that things weren't so great. She was fighting with my dad all the time. She wanted him to move out.
What are you doing?
Drew Peterson was so controlling of Stacy. He would monitor her telephone.
You can't tell me
He wanted to know where she was at all times. He would stalk her and follow her. He was extremely jealous of her, accuse her of doing things she wasn't doing.
On Sunday, October 28, 2007, 3.5 years after Kathleen Savio is found dead in her bathtub, Drew Peterson's 4th wife, Stacy Peterson, goes missing.
After Stacy went missing, her sister, when she couldn't locate her, did file a missing persons report, and the Bolingbrook police then turned the investigation over to the state police. Drew Peterson was a Bolingbrook police officer at the time Stacy went missing, so it wouldn't have been appropriate for them to investigate. Anytime someone goes missing and they're a spouse, the logical person to look at is the other spouse, especially when there's no other reason to believe anyone else would want this person missing.
My dad told me Stacy left him for another guy. and she was going to go on a vacation, and she'd be back and to deal with him. When she got back, she'd deal with everything. When he told me that, she left him, your first reaction is, okay, well, about time, It wasn't shocking. It wasn't a surprise. Everybody in the family knew that it was coming.
But state investigators find Drew's story suspicious.
Stacy Peterson was a very young mother, but she was a great mother, and she doted on her own 2 children and Thomas and Chris, Kathleen's 2 children, like her own. She never would have abandoned those 4 children.
Investigators take a closer look into Drew's past and find that he has a history of deception.
In 1978, Drew was assigned to the Metropolitan Area Narcotics Squad. Undercover work requires a special kind of person, somebody who can carry on a con, be another person, be deceitful, because that's what you're doing. You've taken on a new identity, and you're making others believe that you are someone you're not.
He assisted with other agencies and was basically had to be a totally different person. And he was actually really good at it.
While working undercover, Peterson shows a dark side.
He kind of went rogue, and he became a bad cop. He became a dirty cop. He started taking bribes. He started doing things that his superiors did not know about. That got him in trouble.
After working 7 years undercover, Drew Peterson is fired from the Bolingbrook PD.
During that time, I remember, we had to go move. He lost his house. We had to go live with my grandparents, and then eventually he ended up winning his job back.
Well, Drew Peterson knows the system, and he knows what it takes to prove allegations, and there just wasn't enough proof.
Now that his 4th wife has disappeared, Drew is prepared to face the scrutiny.
The police obtained a search warrant for Drew Peterson's house, but he got tipped off about it.
Drew Peterson's friends at the police department warn him that detectives are on their way to his door, so he takes action.
He showed up at my house, and he had 3 rifles. And he told me, these are my favorites. Now that she's reported as a missing person, they're going to come search the house. He didn't want anything to happen to these guns.
Drew also writes his son a check for approximately $200,000, drawn from a line of credit.
He put Stephen in a very bad position because arguably he was starting to bring Stephen into his little criminal circle.
If Drew did kill Stacy, then Stephen could be implicated as an accessory to murder.
Never thought twice about it. Never thought it was anything shady. Looking back, I know that he was probably preparing for if he were to get arrested, for bail money. Because now we could, if there's a certain amount, we could post that bail now.
Stephen may believe in his father, but Drew Peterson is about to destroy his family, incite a media circus, and expose a brutal murder. Investigators execute a search warrant of Drew Peterson's home and discover ammunition for rifles that are nowhere to be found. Drew admits the rifles are at his son Stephen's house. Investigators want the firearms taken into evidence, so they reach out to Stephen.
They called me up and said, hey, can you come in on Friday, interview with us, and bring those guns? Sure, absolutely. I answered every question they had, and it, kind of left the meeting, like everything was fine.
But Drew's actions cast a shadow over his son.
I would definitely think my dad would never put me in any position where it would ruin my life in any way. But people kind of looked at me like I was hiding something, or I was, helping him out.
Stephen struggles with the accusations that are being leveled against his father.
Anytime something major like this happens, the first stage is denial. That you can't expect ever that your family member would be capable of murder. You just thought Stacy was gone, she left him. And eventually things would work out and play out, and we'd be back to normal eventually.
But as time goes on, the investigation into Stacy's disappearance hits a dead end.
They did a massive search for Stacy, and they can't find her. So they can't say for sure that she's deceased or if she just ran away somewhere.
With suspicion against Drew mounting, the family of Drew's third wife, Kathleen, pressures the authorities to revisit her death from 3 years earlier.
I knew that he killed her, and I wasn't going to ever let go. I was there from the beginning for my sister, and I'm here to the end.
The state attorney said, I'm going to take another look at Kathleen's death. He wasn't in office at the time she died. And so that's what they did. And they found some surprising things about Kathleen's death that were overlooked before.
The state's attorney in the prosecution for Kathleen's death had a theory that the Illinois State Police had not done their job properly, so they had missed evidence.
One revealing issue is the unsettled nature of Drew and Kathleen's divorce.
Kathleen Savio was Drew Peterson's third wife, so that was his third divorce and the second involving children. She and Drew still had to finalize the financial distribution of the property.
A divorce wasn't finalized, but they were able to get what's called a bifurcated divorce. Now that is, they are legally divorced, but the property has not been settled.
Mommy, I've never seen you more radiant. Mommy, I love you.
It's a miracle we made it this far.
I love you, Mommy.
An unhappy Drew stands to lose a lot to his ex-wife.
So it appeared that Kathleen was going to get custody of the boys, the house, half of Drew's pension, and also half of other businesses that they had on the side.
Kathleen knows she has a target on her back.
She told her sisters that she feared he would kill her and make it look like an accident, that she would never live to see everything finalized in their divorce.
After Kathleen dies, the finances are settled in Drew's favor.
2 weeks after Kathleen died, Drew produced a will, a handwritten will that he said was Kathleen's, and it was dated from the late 1990s. Now, Kathleen, mind you, had told people, more than one, that she didn't have a will. But Drew was like, yeah, she did. Drew was going to lose a lot if they had actually gone through with the property settlement aspect of the divorce. But with her dead, and with this will he produced, he got it all.
Investigators also review the alibi Drew provided for the night of Kathleen's death.
In an unusual move, the police talked to Stacy at home and allowed Drew to be present for the interview. That is not protocol. You talk to people individually. Drew sat right next to her, even answering some of the questions himself. I can't emphasize enough how inappropriate that was.
A review of the forensic evidence is also revealing.
Because Kathleen's death was deemed accidental, and at the time, police didn't really see signs of foul play, they didn't treat the scene like a crime. I mean, it wasn't secured. Drew Peterson was allowed to walk through the area. Not enough photos were taken. It wasn't preserved and processed like a crime scene. So vital evidence arguably was lost.
Investigators make the shocking decision to exhume Kathleen's body.
For them to dig it up, obviously it was getting serious. But again, you still never thought anything was going to come of it.
When Drew Peterson learns police are about to dig up his ex-wife, he appears unfazed.
My dad never expressed concern about the Kathy case. Through the whole thing, he was never seemed worried. Never really seemed concerned. He was always very confident that everything was just going to blow over and life was going to go back to normal.
I think the authorities decided to exhume Kathleen because there was so much media attention that they felt like they had to go reinvestigate.
While investigators wait for new autopsy results, the media swarms Drew Peterson's house.
It was just nonstop after that. It was like every news cycle, there was some story about him, which sparked my dad to feel the need to defend himself on national TV.
I understand very well. I mean, the media's done everything they can to keep me in a position looking guilty.
My father definitely reached celebrity status, and even more so in his own mind. He was on every news station, he was on every newspaper, every magazine. It was everywhere, 24/7.
When the new autopsy is complete, the results are telling.
At that autopsy, it was learned that she had a lot of bruises on her, and they weren't old bruises. They were more consistent with being recent, close in time to her death, including the laceration on the back of her head. So the conclusion was that she died from a homicide, death at the hands of another.
Will County State Police arrest Drew Peterson for Kathleen's murder and hold him on a $20 million bond. Stephen takes in his 4 young siblings as turmoil engulfs their family.
At this point, my dad was arrested. I had a newborn. Now I have 4 more kids. I'm losing my job. Everything just kind of snowballed, just kind of fell apart.
With Drew incarcerated awaiting trial, the media attention continues. The film Drew Peterson Untouchable is produced, airing 6 months before proceedings begin. As the trial finally gets underway, Stephen stands by his father.
Never in a million years did I think he was going to be convicted for murdering Kathy. You know, I thought they were grasping at straws. There was no evidence whatsoever. They couldn't point to when it happened, how it happened, who did it. You know, they couldn't link him to it. So for all that time, you just, you know, this is going to blow over.
The state of Illinois believes they have evidence proving that Kathleen's death was a homicide and that Drew Peterson had a financial motive. But there is a hole in the prosecution's case.
They had no evidence that Drew Peterson had done anything. They had no physical evidence at all.
The prosecution's case is further weakened because Drew Peterson's 4th wife, Stacy, gave him an alibi at the time of Kathleen's death.
Go ahead, tell him, honey.
When Stacy was interviewed by the police, Drew made sure she was his alibi for that night because he sat right next to her during that interview.
Now, Stacy's disappearance makes it impossible to refute her claim. Until a new witness steps forward, Stacy's minister, Reverend Neil Shorey.
Reverend Shorey had been providing marital counseling to Drew and Stacy and met with Stacy individually at a coffee shop in Bolingbrook. He said that she had confided in him, that she had lied to the police.
Reverend Shorey told the police that about 2 months before she disappeared, Stacy met with him and told him that Drew killed Kathleen. Reverend Shorey did not report what Stacy told him to the authorities because she didn't want him to. She feared for her life, and he didn't want to endanger her.
The Reverend's powerful testimony comes with a catch. It's hearsay, and therefore inadmissible. But a new hearsay law enacted in the wake of Stacy's disappearance might give prosecutors the ammunition they need. Named after Drew Peterson, it is dubbed Drew's Law.
So they passed Drew's Law so they could prosecute Drew Peterson so they could get in certain evidence.
Drew's Law was, I felt, was dangerous, you know. You can't change the law just to get one person because it's going to open up a lot of floodgates and have a lot of, anybody could say anything about anybody, and now they're going to let it in. You know, that was scary.
With third-party witness statements now permissible, Reverend Shorey is called to testify for the prosecution.
Reverend Shorey told the police that about 2 months before she disappeared, Stacy told him that the night Kathleen died,
Drew?
She woke up at home and Drew wasn't there. And then he came home and he was wearing all black. And he was carrying a bag with women's clothes, which he put in the washing machine, and they weren't her clothes. And then he coached her to say that he was with her all night. If she's questioned about it, he was with her all night.
Prosecutors put forward a new theory of Kathleen's death.
Prosecutors believe that Drew Peterson broke into Kathleen's house and surprised her while she was home alone, and that he assaulted her. That he drowned her in the toilet and then put in the bathtub and made to look as though she drowned in the bathtub.
The state's attorney then presents new evidence that rocks the court, a history of domestic violence calls.
After Drew moved out and in with Stacy, The police were constantly being called. Those two, Kathleen and Drew, were constantly at each other. There was a time when he broke into her house. It was July 2002. He held Kathleen down, pointing a knife at her, and he said, "Where do you want it?" And she said, "In the head." But he ultimately couldn't kill the mother of his children. At least at that point.
Fearing for her life, Kathleen reaches out for help.
Kathleen waited 4 months after Drew terrorized her with the knife on the stairs before writing a letter to an assistant state's attorney, basically begging for help. In the letter, Kathleen said, "He knows how to manipulate the system, and his next step is to take away the children or kill me instead."
Drew Peterson's children watch as witness after witness conveys the harsh reality of the monster their father really is.
I never really had that aha moment of when I thought he was guilty. But now Stacy's not coming home ever. You know, how could they have not found her by now? You just kind of put it all together, and you just kind of realize that, maybe he did. Maybe he's not that person he thought he was, and he could be guilty.
Despite the strong testimony about Drew and Kathleen's troubled relationship, the lack of physical evidence has the defense feeling confident.
Our case was rock solid. They had presented no evidence that tied Drew to this scene, whether you thought it was a murder or an accident.
Then, the defense makes a shocking move and calls divorce attorney Harry Smith to the stand.
For some reason that I will never understand, the lead defense attorney decided to call Harry Smith and had Harry Smith testify.
His unexpected testimony turns the trial on its head.
Harry Smith is a matrimonial attorney in Illinois, and he represented Kathleen Savio in her divorce from Drew Peterson. Well, he was contacted by Stacy not long before Stacy disappeared. She wanted him to represent her.
For some reason that I will never understand, the lead defense attorney decided to call Harry Smith and had Harry Smith testify.
Now, they expected Harry Smith to get up there and say that Stacy wanted custody of the 4 kids and would say anything in order to make sure she got those kids. She'd even lie to make sure.
Do you remember his ex-wife?
But instead, Harry said that Stacy told him Drew killed Kathleen. That was a bombshell in the courtroom. I mean, everybody was like, "Are you kidding me?" They've just elicited on the stand the defense in their own case that the missing wife said Drew killed Kathleen. This was not good for the defense.
But Drew Peterson's defense team has one last witness. Drew's own son, Thomas Peterson.
The defense called one of Drew Peterson's 5 sons, Thomas, who was Kathleen's son. He supported his father, and he said that no one knows his father the way he does, and that he knows for a fact his father could never hurt his mother.
Tom definitely wanted to help my dad. I mean, we all did, It's kind of hard to explain that you almost don't care what he did or didn't do. It's your dad. You don't want him sitting in prison.
As the trial comes to an end and the jury begins deliberations, Drew's children wait for the news that will determine the future of their family.
The first thing I see is a tease for the verdict on the news. Drew Peterson, verdict is in. It's coming up after this break. All right, this is years of waiting and wondering and not knowing what's going to happen.
In a unanimous decision, the jurors convict Peterson of first-degree murder in the death of his ex-wife, Kathleen Savio. He's sentenced to 38 years in prison.
That was years of emotions came out of me that time. It was hard to take, because now not only is your dad gone, you're losing one of your dad, your friend, these kids are permanent now. These kids don't have any parents. Now I'm it, and this is my life now. There's no other way.
With Drew Peterson's murder conviction, his children must accept their father is a killer.
Growing up, my dad was my hero. You know, he led me in the right direction of careers. I wanted to be just like him, and, you know, he was a great guy, and obviously that all changed. Even though, you know, I stuck by him I'll still stand by him, you know, he's still my dad, but I'm not gonna bury my head in the sand and pretend like nothing happened and that he didn't put us through all this.
While Drew Peterson remains locked up in prison for Kathleen's murder, his son Stephen and all his children have found joy again.
Through this whole thing, I definitely realized people have it a lot worse than me. I never wanted pity from anybody. I never wanted a handout. I just want those kids to have the best life possible, and if I could give that to them, I'll, you know, happily do it.
After the trial, Drew's law was repealed by the state of Illinois, even though Stacy Peterson was still considered a missing person.